The Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jewish people, was near. When he looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, or the crowd, or the multitude, is the only miracle story that appears in all 4 Gospels in some form. Some of the details are different, but the overall event is the same. A crowd of people follows Jesus to a place where they aren't able to get food. Jesus blesses the little bit of food that is available. Everyone eats and is satisfied, and there are leftovers. This is a story that nearly everyone in the world knows, whether they have read the Bible or attend a Christian church or not. It's that familiar. For us as Christians, it's a story of Jesus blessing the gifts we faithfully bring to him and the abundance that comes from that, not just for ourselves, but for the people who are around us. It's a story that reminds us of what can happen when we open ourselves up and make our gifts available to do ministry in Christ's name. And I'm going to let Shana pick it up from there. She has a lot to share, and she'll barely scratch the surface this morning. So in the coming weeks, I invite you to have further conversations with her about her experiences. And when you ask her about her experiences, be specific. If you ask her, "What was it like?" you'll get an answer like fine, awesome, exhausting, amazing, and so on. And youth gatherings are all of those things. But if you say, "Tell me a story about," you'll learn a lot more. Tell me a story about something you learned that surprised you, or about what you learned about God in New Orleans, or about your favorite speaker and what they said, or about how something you did in New Orleans can be done here in Bellevue. You get the idea. Shana?
Good morning.
Morning.
think to go back and be able to share about the gathering, also need to go back a little bit for the historical reference.
Yep.
But I'd like to start with the prayer that was in our trendings on the July 24th. Wednesday. What do we call that? You know, what we all get, which I love them every Wednesday. This was the sending for the closing worship at the last day of the ELCA youth gathering, and I felt like it said so much. You are created to be brave. You are created to be authentic. You are created to be free. You are created to be disruptive. Powerful words for 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. That was the message for these kids. But it was also pretty powerful for us adults. So to go back, there's a historical reference. In 2018, we had a youth director, Emily, who had been to the ELCA gathering several times before and had met with a person named Abby Williams in a booth talking about Lantern Hill. And it really spoke to Emily. And Emily came back, and it's my understanding that for a few years kind of talked about, wow, could we take a mission trip to Lantern Hill in Ensenada, Mexico? And for whatever reason, it was determined that we would send a group of kids in June of 2019. So in late fall 2018, there was a meeting after church for any kids, and parents were welcome to participate in the meeting, about going on a mission trip. And our youngest daughter, Jillian, was going to be a junior in high school. And she said, I really want to do this. Can I go to the meeting? And I was like, well, absolutely. I'm going to sit in the car. I've got a lot going on. You go to the meeting, and, I'll just see you after the meeting. Well, it was freezing cold that day, pouring down rain. And I was like, well, why would I sit in my freezing cold car when I'll just sit in the back of the room and hear what they're talking about. Well, funny things happen when you sit in a room and you get invited to go to Mexico with a group of kids. And I was like, oh no, I can't go. I'm too busy. There's too much going on at work. I can't do a mission trip. Well, I heard a little voice a little later that afternoon when they were sending out an email just trying to get more information. And I heard a voice say, why not? Why not go? So fast forward June 2019, the Mexico 12, you all sent 6 adults, 6 kids to Ensenada, Mexico. I did not know what I was getting into. Full disclosure, I've learned this about myself. I kind of jump in, I kind of dive in a little bit with maybe not having all the details. That is so why I married my husband, because he, thank the Lord, because he takes care of the details. I'm kind of like, all right, let's go. This sounds good. So I packed a bag. We went to Ensenada. We went and saw Lantern Hill. We got engaged. We worked with these kids, and I fell in love. I fell in love with Lantern Hill, whose mission is breaking the chains of poverty through education, nutrition, and care. Something that I could so get behind, and right in front of our eyes, we saw change happening. And it was really, really powerful. And at the end of that trip, couple board members were also there at the same time, board members of Friends of Lantern Hill. And they asked me, do you want to be on the board? No, I can't be on the board. I'm too busy. I've got too much going on. My work is crazy. I can't be on the board. I don't speak Spanish. I was like, this is not an option. So over the next 6 months, I kept hearing a voice saying, why not? Why not? So I reached back out, and in January 2020, I became a board member of the Friends of Lantern Hill. Well, you kind of know part of the story then. For the next 4 years, we hit COVID. 5 months later, it shut down all mission trips. It changed what was going on with Lantern Hill. It really, really impacted those kids. You think it was hard doing online learning in the United States of America? Let me tell you, it was really hard on kids in Mexico, all of whom didn't have a computer, and yet they were expected to keep learning. So obviously we changed processes. There was need for financial support, and that is where I give you my sincere thanks and gratitude for this congregation, because you have been amazing with your generosity, and you have made a difference in so many lives. So, fast forward to February of 2024, and we're on a Zoom call, board meeting, and Abby Williams says, we need to go to the gathering. We need to have a presence at the ELCA youth gathering. We need to get mission trips back. We need more people to learn about, hear, see, experience Lantern Hill. Shana, would you go? No. I can't go. I can't go to New Orleans in July to the youth gathering. I didn't know exactly what was the youth gathering. I'd never been, right? And so they kept, everybody on the board kept talking about who was going to go, and plans proceeded. Well, along the way, things were really challenging for me personally in my professional life. I would say that the last 7 months have been probably some of the most challenging for me, including in May, one of my dear, beloved employees committed suicide. And it broke my heart for a million different reasons. This was a young person with their life ahead of them. This was a person that I saw almost every single day for 18 months. And then she was gone. And I really was struggling. It was just one more thing on top of another. And there was a last call for Shana. We could really use one more person to go to the gathering. And I said, no, I can't go. I can't go. And later that night, I heard, well, why not? So, talked to Eric, said, I think I need to go. I think I need to go to New Orleans. So I got on the computer, I pulled up the website for the 2024 ELCA Youth Gathering, and it was created to be. That was the theme of this year's conference. And I loved what they said. And I wrote in the July-August, The Voice, what was being said, why this theme, what the focus was for the teenagers that were going to be attending. It was described as the gathering is a place to broaden our understanding of God's love, to pay attention to, advocate for, and care for our neighbors, and to know that as both saint and sinner, we are loved. May all participants leave knowing that they matter, that they are loved, and that they are sent out into a hurting world to love like Jesus. That was really powerful to me because I've been feeling like everything that is going on in the world, not just my little world, my teeny tiny little world that just kind of kept feeling like I was losing my hope in what was going on with humanity and the wars and the discourse in our own country, in our own state, in my own little teeny tiny work world. Wow, if I need this at 55 years old, I can only imagine what's going on in our teenagers' heads, knowing what we're leaving them is not as great as what I would say when I was 16 years old. So I went to New Orleans. I worked in our booth, talking to hundreds of kids, not just about Lantern Hill, but about mission trips, about what they were thinking, about the speakers, about the booths. If you've ever been in the convention center in New Orleans, it's huge. It is there, and there were thousands. I think there was 16,000 kids that were in attendance this year, and then adults and vendors and all of these people coming together with the theme of created to be. So when you think about that, and my only reference was Camp Luther Haven, Coeur d'Alene Lake, and kumbaya, and you do a lot of fun things, and it's just really a super positive experience, right? And I look around, and I look at the speakers, and I look at the booths, and this is what topics they were covering: climate change, global warming, depression, discrimination, famine, foreign wars and the impact on children, racism, social media and the impact on mental health, suicide. Those are pretty heavy. And yet, the kids were smiling. The kids were engaged. The kids, if you think that this was too heavy for a bunch of teenagers, spoiler alert, they already know. They know what's coming. They see it, they live it, they experience it every day. So I commend the ELCA. I commend the bravery to have speakers come, to invite anyone that wanted to come in, have a booth, share, speak, sing, be open, have really hard conversations, because these kids were ready to hear it. There was, at night, in the evenings, we would go to the Staples Center, right? Is that the one? It's where their basketball team plays. It's huge. And there would be music and beautiful music. And there were always speakers that I get every night. I cried. And I wasn't the only one. I think we sat around a lot of kids that cried because it spoke to them. And people talked about being trans, being black, losing almost everything that they had, and seriously considering suicide. These were the conversations. And the kids, you have 16,000 teenagers sitting in an arena engaged. And then there'd be a beautiful music, there'd be clapping and dancing, and the kids would go back and we would walk the miles all together back to all of our hotel rooms. And they'd get up and they'd do it again. And they would laugh and they would share and they would sing and they would dance. And they'd say, "We got this." I have so much hope in that generation. I left uplifted. I left feeling more optimistic than when I got there. So when I kept saying, why would I go? That was my why not. The Lord has a path and a plan, and sometimes it's very circuitous. And sometimes, even though it's set right in front of us as an offer, we go, "Oh, I can't do that." And then may you hear the little voice in your head that says, "Why not?" Thank you.